The hidden path of Baal. Has an ancient god returned? Catholic mystery. Throughout history, the enigmatic figure of Baal has captivated and terrified in equal measure. Once revered as a powerful god of storms, fertility, and life itself, Baal was central to the spiritual lives of ancient civilizations like the Canaanites and Phoenicians. Yet, his story took a dark turn as monotheistic religions rose to dominance, transforming him from a divine force into a symbol of evil, chaos, and rebellion. Cast as a rival to Yahweh in the Hebrew Bible, Baal's legacy was systematically erased, his worship condemned as idolatry, and his followers labeled as enemies. But Baal's story didn't end there. Over the centuries, his image evolved, from a demonized figure in religious texts to a monstrous villain in modern pop culture, appearing in horror films, video games, and more. Now, whispers of his resurgence echo in spiritual discussions, underground rituals, and debates about freedom from restrictive belief systems. Could this ancient god, long suppressed and rebranded, be finding a new foothold in the modern age? This exploration of Baal's hidden path invites us to confront deeper questions about duality, morality, and humanity's relationship with power. Is his return a dangerous revival, or does it reflect a growing rejection of rigid doctrines in search of something raw, untamed, and primal? Let's explore the fascinating questions and mysterious truths behind the path of Baal. Before diving into these contents, don't forget to subscribe our channel and activate the bell button so you don't miss out any upcoming videos. Baal was one of the most ancient lord. Baal wasn't just another deity. He was a god of power, feared and worshipped with sacrifices, even human sacrifices. In the ancient Near East, Baal was no myth. He was as real as the storms he commanded, and as vital as the rains he withheld. Baal's followers believed he controlled life and death, and his wrath could devastate entire communities. This was a god whose demands came with a price. Baal's name translates to Lord or owner in Semitic languages, and he held a powerful role among societies like the Canaanites and Phoenicians. This god wasn't simply a figure of folklore. He was the lifeblood of these ancient civilizations, especially in agrarian societies where the ability to grow food meant survival. In that world, Baal symbolized the forces of nature. He was rain, he was thunder, he was the very fertility of the land. Imagine living in a time where a single season of drought could mean disaster for an entire community. Baal was the one who could bring that rain, who could ensure that crops flourished and herds grew strong. Yet this wasn't a benevolent deity. Baal's power was dual-edged. He represented life and abundance, yes, but also destruction. The same god who made the crops grow could summon floods and storms that wiped them out. Baal demanded to be respected, and if he wasn't, entire regions could face his fury. As Baal's influence spread, so did his reputation. His temples spanned the region, with offerings ranging from harvests to the unthinkable, all brought to keep his favor. Rulers and commoners alike were loyal, seeing Baal as essential to life and power. His cult even reached Egypt, impacting pharaohs and shaping the symbols and rituals of other cultures. This wasn't just a local deity. Baal's reach extended into the very fabric of society. But Baal's story took a dark twist as monotheistic religions emerged, particularly in the Hebrew Bible. Baal went from being respected to reviled. He became the ultimate rival to Yahweh, branded as a figure of sin and corruption. His name and followers were cast as dangerous threats. Over time, Baal was transformed in religious texts from a god of storms and fertility to a demonized symbol of chaos and evil. How did Baal become a symbol of idolatry? Baal's story doesn't just sit quietly in the background of history, it roars through the pages of ancient scriptures. In the Bible, Baal is cast as the ultimate villain, a god so twisted and corrupt that his very worship was considered an unforgivable betrayal. This isn't some story of cultural exchange or friendly rivalry. No, Baal worship was seen as outright rebellion, an insult to Yahweh, the God of Israel. This wasn't just spiritual warfare, it was political. By demonizing Baal, The writers of these texts didn't just condemn a religion, they declared war on an entire way of life. What does that mean in real terms? Consider this. Anyone caught worshipping Baal was seen as a traitor, marked as an enemy. Followers were hunted, ostracized, and sometimes even executed. The act of worshipping Baal was labeled as idolatry, the ultimate sin punishable by death. It wasn't enough to simply turn away from Baal. Followers were expected to reject him entirely and, in many cases, were forced to make a public denunciation. It wasn't just the worship itself that angered Yahweh's followers, it was the practices surrounding Baal worship. Rituals that involved sacrifices, sometimes extreme ones, were painted as barbaric and detestable. Baal's rites were often intense and deeply visceral, with offerings that pushed the boundaries of what most people could stomach. This wasn't just a philosophical disagreement, it was a visceral clash of values. Baal represented something primal, something raw that the emerging monotheistic religions found deeply threatening. They needed... Consider this. The people who once revered Baal didn't suddenly vanish. They didn't stop worshipping him just because a new religion told them to. These were real people with deeply held beliefs, facing persecution and the systematic erasure of their traditions. Their god was turned into a devil, their practices labeled as demonic. Baal's fall from grace in ancient scriptures isn't just a mythological footnote. It's a brutal example of how one belief system can overwrite another. Baal wasn't just confined to one place or one people. His reach extended across ancient civilizations, and his identity evolved along the way. This wasn't a small-time god limited to the land of Canaan or Phoenicia. No, Baal adapted and expanded. He became Zeus in Greece, Jupiter in Rome. The Romans embraced his thunder, the Greeks his storms, and suddenly Baal wasn't just the god of a handful of villages. He was a cosmic force, reshaped and remade to fit each new culture that encountered him. How did this happen? Power and influence. The impact of Baal's image was so profound that every society molded him into their own deity. But this wasn't a casual borrowing. It was strategic. Leaders saw the power Baal held and wanted it for themselves, weaving him into their own mythologies to legitimize their rule. In Egypt, Baal's presence blended with other gods to fit into the Egyptian pantheon, adding to the prestige of pharaohs who sought to embody his strength. But in blending with other deities, Baal lost some of his raw, primal identity. Zeus, for example, became the king of the gods within a more civilized framework, while Jupiter ruled Rome with law and order. Baal's tempestuous, sometimes violent nature was diluted to suit the needs of powerful empires that prioritized control over chaos. This transformation sanitized Baal, reshaping him to fit societies that required their gods to reflect order and stability. Yet while these empires rebranded him, they couldn't fully erase Baal's darker aspects. People remembered his history, knew that behind the symbols of thunder and storm lay a god who demanded real sacrifices. They may have called him by different names, but the essence of Baal, that fierce and consuming force, remained just beneath the surface. And here's where it gets interesting. While Baal was civilized in the eyes of the Greeks and Romans, he was still feared. Even in his transformation, he carried the weight of his original power. So when Christianity rose and absorbed some of these old symbols, Baal's essence was too wild, too chaotic to fit into the peaceful narrative of the new faith. He needed to be cast out, labeled as a dark force. The sanitized version of Baal was erased, and what remained was a demonized symbol, a fallen god stripped of his earlier glories. An interesting path makes Baal still alive in modern culture. Baal didn't stay locked in ancient scriptures or forgotten mythology. He is alive and well in modern culture, but his image has been rebranded yet again, this time as a symbol of pure evil. In horror films, video games, books, and TV shows, Baal is no longer the god of storms and fertility once worshipped across the ancient world. Instead, he has been twisted into something dark and terrifying. Take horror movies, for example. When Baal appears, it's not as a misunderstood deity or a complex force of nature. No, he is the embodiment of malevolence, often portrayed as a demonic entity, intent on possession, torment, and destruction. Gone is any notion of Baal as a bringer of rain or fertility. Instead, he is an infernal being of darkness and chaos, designed to send shivers down the spine. The same goes for video games. In games like Diablo 2, Baal is a main antagonist, a demon lord bent on annihilation. Players don't see him as a god to be worshipped or respected. He's a boss to be defeated, an enemy with one goal: total destruction. His portrayal taps into something visceral. Baal isn't just a bad guy. He's the distilled essence of all-consuming darkness, the final obstacle standing between players and victory. It's as if modern culture has taken all that was dark and wild about Baal in the ancient world and amplified it, distilling him down to pure evil. But why does modern culture keep bringing Baal back in these twisted roles? Why does he reappear as the villain again and again, instead of as the god he once was? The answer is simple. Baal's story sells. His name, his imagery. They are exotic, powerful, and just obscure enough to feel both ancient and forbidden. This taps into humanity's fascination with the occult, with the dark and mysterious. For creators looking to captivate audiences, Baal is a goldmine of intrigue and fear. Yet, let's not ignore what's happening here. By reducing Baal to an evil figure, pop culture has stripped away every trace of his original role. He is no longer a symbol of nature's raw power or life-sustaining reigns. Instead, he's a one-dimensional villain meant to shock and thrill. And here's the irony. This new version of Baal might be more popular than he ever was in ancient times. Yet it's further from his true origins than ever. What if Baal, this ancient god we now see as a symbol of evil, was never purely good or evil to begin with? What if Baal's story actually points to something far more complex? A force that embodies the duality of nature and the human spirit? Baal wasn't a typical black and white character. He represented both creation and destruction, fertility and barrenness, life and death. He wasn't bound to one role or moral stance. He was everything at once. Nature itself is a dual force. The same storm that brings life-giving rain can destroy entire fields. The same sun that nourishes crops can scorch them if it becomes too intense. Baal was a god who personified this natural balance, or imbalance depending on how you look at it. He wasn't there to hand out blessings or curses based on moral judgments. His power was raw, indifferent, and primal. Worshippers respected and feared him for it, understanding that this was the reality of their world. People want Baal to fit into their neat boxes of good and evil. But here's the harsh truth. Humans don't like gods that refuse to fit into neat boxes of good and evil. We crave simplicity, clear-cut heroes and villains. That's why, over time, Baal was demonized and cast aside. Emerging monotheistic religions needed gods of order, justice, and mercy. They needed figures who represented absolute goodness. Baal, in contrast, was chaos, both the bringer of life and the harbinger of death. And so, he was turned into a villain, stripped of his natural complexity, and reduced to the parts people feared. Today, Baal's story continues, not as the multifaceted god he once was, but as a caricature of darkness and destruction. Yet here's where the story gets even darker. This transformation of Baal didn't just erase his role as a god of duality. It erased an understanding that ancient cultures had about nature and existence itself. Ancient societies saw Baal's dual nature as a reminder that life isn't predictable, that the forces governing the world are powerful and untamed. This wasn't a comforting thought, but it was an honest one. It taught people to respect the unknown and to honor the reality that life could be both beautiful and terrifying. By reducing Baal to a figure of pure evil, we didn't just simplify his character. We lost a deeper understanding of the world. We lost the ability to see life as a balance, as something that doesn't always make sense or fit our ideals. Today, Baal's story might seem like an ancient myth, a forgotten god's tale. But the truth is, it's a cautionary tale about how we deal with duality and how we struggle to accept forces that don't conform to our expectations. Here's the kicker. Baal isn't staying buried in ancient history. He's back, resurfacing in modern conversations, religious debates, and, believe it or not, real-life rituals. The forgotten god is being invoked once again, not just as a mythical figure, but as a symbol of rebellion, power, and a challenge to traditional belief systems. So, what's driving this resurgence? Why are people today looking back to Baal, a god cast out and demonized for centuries, and calling him forth into modern spiritual discussions? The return of Baal, a symbol of rebellion and freedom. One reason is that Baal represents a kind of primal power that defies conventional morality. He's not a god of rules or doctrines. He's wild, untamed, a god of nature's raw forces, unconcerned with human ideals of good and evil. That's exactly what makes him intriguing to a new generation of spiritual seekers who are rejecting traditional religions and exploring paths of their own. People are tired of conventional systems that dictate how they should live, what they should believe, and what's right or wrong. Baal, as a symbol, offers an alternative, a path of self-empowerment that is unapologetic and challenges established norms. And it's not just about spirituality. Baal's re-emergence taps into something much deeper, a cultural shift. Look around. People are questioning authority everywhere. Politics, media, religion, you name it. They're pushing back against the narratives they've been told to accept without question. Baal represents that rebellion, that defiance. By reconnecting with this forgotten deity, people are, in a way, declaring their independence from systems that have shaped society for thousands of years. They're saying, we don't need to follow your rules anymore. Baal is even showing up in real rituals today, practiced by groups looking to revive ancient traditions or create new ones inspired by his lore. These groups aren't bound by the restrictions of mainstream religions and are exploring the darker, primal aspects of spirituality. In some extreme cases, people are performing ceremonies, making offerings, and invoking Baal as a symbol of power. Now, we're not talking about mainstream gatherings or large congregations. These are small groups, underground practices, and it's happening around the world. Baal, a god who doesn't care about morality, who doesn't judge, who offers power to those who dare to invoke him, has become a figure of intrigue and controversy. Of course, this has stirred up fear and criticism. Some see it as a dangerous trend, claiming these practices are dabbling in forces they don't understand or, worse, playing with something evil. But here's the question. Is Baal's resurgence truly dangerous, or is this fear just a result of centuries of demonization? Could it be that the very idea of Baal's power scares people because it challenges the stability of the moral systems we've been taught to rely on? And so, here's the final twist in the tale of Baal. This ancient god who once ruled over storms and fertility, who was demonized in religious texts, who re-emerged in pop culture as a monstrous villain, has now become a symbol of breaking free from restrictive belief systems. Baal's resurgence is more than just a trend, it's a reaction. People are tired of being told their lives must fit within narrow moral lines, that every action must either be a blessing or a sin. They're tired of being judged, tired of strict systems that label their curiosity as rebellion and their desires as corruption. In Baal, they're finding a god who doesn't conform to these standards. He's not here to judge your actions, demand repentance, or shame you into submission. Instead, Baal represents something raw and uncontainable, a force of nature that refuses to be boxed into the dichotomies of good and evil. For some, that's terrifying. For others, it's liberating. They're saying, we don't need to follow your rules anymore. Baal is showing up in real rituals today practiced by groups looking to revive ancient traditions or even create new ones inspired by his law. They're not bound by the restrictions of mainstream religions and are exploring both the dark and bright sides of mythology. Is there power in this kind of freedom? The primal aspects of spirituality associated with Baal have begun resurfacing in surprising ways. In some extreme cases, people are performing ceremonies, making offerings, and invoking Baal as a symbol of power. These aren't mainstream gatherings or large congregations. These are small, underground groups engaging in practices scattered across the globe. Baal, a god who doesn't care about morality or judgment, offers power to those daring enough to invoke him. Naturally, this has sparked controversy. Some view these practices as dangerous, accusing them of dabbling in forces they don't understand, or worse, playing with something evil. But here's the question: is Baal's resurgence truly dangerous? Or is that fear rooted in centuries of demonization? Could it be that the very idea of Baal's power unsettles people because it challenges the stability of the moral systems we've been taught to rely on? Here's the final twist in Baal's tale. This ancient god, who once ruled over storms and fertility, who was demonized in religious texts, and later emerged in pop culture as a monstrous villain, is now a symbol of breaking free from restrictive belief systems. Baal's resurgence isn't just a trend, it's a reaction. People are tired of being told their lives must fit into narrow moral lines, that every action must either be a blessing or a sin. They're exhausted by the judgment and the rigid systems labeling their curiosity as rebellion and their desires as corruption. In Baal, they are finding a god who doesn't conform to these standards. He doesn't judge your actions, demand repentance, or shame you into submission. Baal is a reminder that life is wild, unpredictable, and doesn't always fit into neat boxes of right and wrong. For centuries, organized religions have provided answers and absolutes, guiding people with rules promising order and salvation in exchange for obedience. But there's a cost. If you break away from these rules, you're often seen as a lost soul or an outcast. Questioning the prescribed path can be dangerous, and sometimes even punished. Baal's presence throws all of that out the window. He is a god who doesn't ask you to be anything other than what you are. He doesn't care if your journey is unconventional. For many, that's a powerful and liberating idea. And there's something deeply ironic about Baal's place in history. Religions that once demonized him did so to assert their own authority. By casting Baal as evil, they ensured their followers wouldn't stray. But here's the kicker. By doing so, they inadvertently kept Baal alive, lurking in the shadows as a forbidden symbol, mysterious and powerful, precisely because he was cast out. In a way, their attempt to erase him only ensured his continued existence as a countercultural icon. The more they tried to suppress his influence, the more intrigue he carried. To be clear, most people turning to Baal today aren't trying to resurrect the exact practices of ancient Canaanite worship. They're not building altars or offering sacrifices. What draws them to Baal is his essence, the idea of embracing life's duality, rejecting strict doctrines, and exploring spirituality without the confines of dogma. In Baal, they see a figure who represents freedom from enforced beliefs, a god who respects both the dark and light aspects of existence without shame or judgment. Here's the truth that many mainstream religions won't tell you. There's power in this kind of freedom. When you're not bound by rigid expectations, you're able to see the world more openly and engage with life's mysteries without fear. Embracing a figure like Baal doesn't mean rejecting morality. It means recognizing that morality isn't always black and white. Life, nature, and human experiences are complex, filled with moments of both light and darkness, joy and pain. Baal embodies that balance. And in doing so, he challenges us to face life without fear, shame, or the need to conform. So who is Baal to us now? He's not just a god of ancient mythology or a villain in pop culture. He's a reminder that freedom often lies outside the bounds of structured belief. He's a symbol for those who want to explore their spirituality without being judged, and who believe divinity can be found in every aspect of life, good and bad, bright and dark. In the end, Baal's return is a direct challenge to any system that insists on rigid control over people's lives. It's a reminder that the human spirit is complex and cannot be fully contained by any doctrine or dogma. Baal's story isn't just about him, it's about a deeper truth that resonates with anyone who has ever felt restricted, anyone who has ever wanted to break free from a system that tells them how they're supposed to live, think, or believe. We appreciate you joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating and multifaceted legacy of Baal. Throughout this journey, Baal's story has challenged us to reconsider the essence of true freedom and authenticity, urging us to embrace the interplay of light and darkness in our lives without guilt or fear. His narrative serves as a powerful reminder that understanding life's mysteries often requires stepping away from rigid frameworks and approaching the unknown with an open and courageous heart. May we all find the courage to carve our own paths, pursuing truth and meaning in ways that resonate with our unique journeys. Don't forget to leave comments, hit the buttons like and subscribe, bellow the video. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Stay inspired and take care.